Hello. Hey everybody. I am recording these because unfortunately the question stream I did a little while ago, the one it had to be ended abruptly, um, mainly because there was a slight emergency that fortunately was handled. That's fine, but we had to end that one abruptly. And on top of which, I was also, the footage I got, whatever happened, something happened to my file, but it will not export properly from the very the the sort of normal Windows movie maker I use. As you can see, video editing is not my passion. Um, so instead, to kind of make up for it, I'm going to try to do a couple of series of shorter videos where I answer the questions I did on the stream in addition to ones I didn't get a chance to. Um, and in hopes that I can put them up on YouTube and that people can sort of rewatch them and get that. Sorry you don't get the live experience of me fumbling around and sort of awkwardly answering questions on stream live with a bunch of people. But you know that that's just an experience we'll have to repeat in a different time. So anyway, today for this video, I should say, for this video, I'm going to go ahead and be answering questions that I received on Twitter. Um, in the future, I might answer ones that um, I see pop up in, or the future ones I want to go ahead and answer the ones I got on Tumblr and Reddit and Facebook and other places. So the Twitter thread and the blog had the most, so I think I'm going to start with those. So anyway, onward to the Twitter thread. Um, the very first question I got, or the very first question I should say that pops up in the thread, um, is a good one. It says, how far has Break moved away from its early basic expert adjacent days, and how easy is it to convert and use Break to run adventures from other games? Um, so this is a good question, and it also kind of addresses a bit of a history lesson. Um, I'm not sure how many people listening, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the different variations of D&D and Dungeons and Dragons and that kind of stuff. And the one being referred to here is the basic expert sets that compromised what I guess would eventually be called like classic D&D, where you have like elf and dwarf as a class and that kind of stuff, the sort of artifacts in the original, as opposed to the contemporary the contemporary alternative at the time was Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Um, and as kind of a history thing, when I first started getting back into Dungeons and Dragons after, um, I started way back with second edition D&D and classic Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid. I didn't really kind of see the difference between the two at the time. It wasn't until much later on that I realized, like, oh, these books aren't exactly for the same game. Um, and I kind of mix them up a lot. When I kind of fell off third edition in the early 2000s, I got back into, um, I guess this is the late 2000s actually. This is probably around 2007 or so. I got back into like older versions of D&D, and there was a publication called Labyrinth Lord that's still around. It's still kicking. I think actually they are releasing or recently released a new edition or a new printing a while ago. And Labyrinth Lord kind of existed to um, give a version of these rules that were accessible, or that the version of these old classic rules that you could use to publish stuff. It was made kind of reversed out of the OGL. If I recall, one of the very first efforts to do so. Um, and so when I started working on Break, um, I had been playing around with I've been playing out the OGL, I'm sorry. I've been playing around with Labyrinth Lord for a long time, and um, I had used that and a combination of another book I like called the Rule Cyclopedia, which was a version of D&D that collected all those classic Dungeons and Dragons editions. I think the Menser classic books, the Basic Expert, Master, and Immortals books, and kind of made them into one big um, like hardcover tome. And a tidbit actually that's going to be in this video that I didn't mention on the stream. One of the things that also inspired Break was the fact that somebody had a Japanese version of the rules cyclopedia with all these cool anime illustrations, and I'm like, ah, that's what my game in my head looks like. Um, and originally, I had even just thought about taking a PDF of um, the rules cyclopedia and just putting anime pictures on into it. But good thing that was not the extent of my ambitions. But anyway, um, the long and short of it is when I started working on Break way back then, way back in at the start, even before Gray had come on as like a co-creator, I was working on a hack of Labyrinth Lord. And the idea I was going to do is like this would be like a 30 or 40 page supplement that people could use to sort of do kind of lighter hearted anime style games in Labyrinth Lord. And it was kind of like I had a lot. I remember being really worried when I was pitching like the idea to people and like talking about it, because people who like old D&D also at the time tended to not like anime, which I'm sure will come to a shock to many of you. Anyhow, obviously it that started, and there's obviously a lot changed considering we had a 10-year development period. Um, but what happened was um, more and more I was sort of taking systems and inspirations from it, but I was pulling away from like these things, and I was implementing things that I liked from other games, particularly stuff old school. I mentioned them on the Bashland podcast, but old school hack and the first edition of Stormbringer really kind of inspired me rules wise, and like what you could do with character facing stuff, like class abilities and like how character creation and that kind of stuff. And also, I was really getting into Japanese tabletop RPGs at the time, and one of the only ones available was Made, which that has there's that's a whole can of worms there. But what I really loved about that book, that RPG Made, was the roller choose tables in it, and so that became kind of integral, especially to Break's the way you do character creation in Break, and a lot of the tables in Break. Um, so I would say from there, it's moved pretty far past being a hack of Labyrinth Lord. There are still a lot of obviously. I don't think you can make an adventure like a scenario adventure based fantasy RPG and not owe something to Dungeons and Dragons. So that's obviously still there. And I think there are some artifacts in Break, like artifacts, rules artifacts, that if I pointed them out to you, you'd be able to go, oh, okay, I see where that came from Labyrinth Lord, or our basic expert. Um, but for the most part, it's pretty far divorced from that particular game. Um, I compare it to if you look at games like Shovel Knight, or a lot of those other sort of retro-inspired 2D platformers, um, where they use a lot of the sort of core concepts you see in older games, and kind of the framework, but they add a lot of new stuff into it. They add a lot of their own ideas and their own aesthetic, and you can definitely see the image, the sort of homage, and the what it owes to those games. But you can also see a lot of the creator's own insights and the creator's own ideas of how they should work out. And I think that ends up being where Break sits in comparison to where it used to be. Now, as far as the second part of the question, how easy it is to convert and use Break to run adventures in other games? This is a little bit of a harder question to answer, just because I think a lot of that depends on someone's knowledge of Break and the game they're running. So, like, if you handed me in particular an adventure that is, say, a classic D&D adventure, um, and asking me to run it in Break, I'm going to be able to really easily, because I obviously know the inner workings of Break pretty well, and I also know classic D&D really well, and I'm going to be able to go, okay, this is the intention of the system, of both these systems, and this is how those intentions carry over. Like, this is how they filter over, based on the sort of the intent of the other game. Um, Whereas that said, I do think it's easier than it sounds, because I think with Break, a lot of the modularity of Break and the seam showing, I use that a lot, but I have a very sort of um, model kit, Lego set idea of writing Break rules. And so the intent of Break and I think the reason the rules are there and what they're trying to do is obvious. And I think because of that, if you know the other system pretty well, it's usually pretty easy to bring over to break. I do I do have rules, sort of guidelines for converting stuff into break, and a lot of it is just me expounding on what I just said there. But I'd like to publish them someday. They were originally in the main book, but we had to pare this thing down from like I think when I finished the original like manuscript for break, it was well over 500 pages, and getting bigger. And it wasn't until Gray was just like, no, stop, we need to publish this thing at some point. Um, Both Gray and I have had our moments of no, stop, just move on. Um, but it's I think that's our both our curse as creators is we always want to do more, or we always want to do. But anyway, I think it's pretty easy to convert stuff into break. I think it's pretty easy to make because I think it's pretty easy to make your own adventures up in break, and therefore, by proxy, it's easy to convert stuff. I'd love to see when it's in other people's hands their experiences trying to do so, because I think there's a lot of really awesome material, um, that we're gonna keep writing adventures. We're gonna keep making stuff for break. But obviously, we're two people. Like I would love to see what other people do, and one of those is converting adventures or even interpreting them in break. Like I'd say if you took something for like a darker setting or a more hardcore kind of dungeon crawling setting, it's going to translate over into break a little differently, and I'm very interested to see how that turns out. So anyway, that was the first question. Moving on. Will it have some sort of open or openish license or some way to support hacking or publishing content for it? And also, I'm going to add a similar question came up, so I'm going to address both of them here, which is have you considered a community license for publishing break compatible material? And the answers to those questions is yes. I really would like to do something like that, just because I think it would be fun. I'd love to see what other people did, and I really want to encourage people to make their own stuff for break. And one of those is having the way for it to be semi-official. On the other hand, I am a little trepidatious about it because you don't know what other people are going to publish. It's inevitable someone's going to, no matter what regulations you put in there, no matter what you want to do, there's inevitably someone's going to publish something that you might not think is up to par. You might not agree with it, like politically or sentimentally. I don't think anyone's going to use break to do something that I think is particularly heinous, but you never know, and it's something that worries me. And also, too, I really want Gray and I to be able to publish a couple of things, like some stuff to set the groundwork. I want there to be a groundwork for break before we let people run willy-nilly there, so that there's some kind of baseline, like this is what break is, this is what it is. And when you know what it is, you can kind of then run off and do your own thing with it. So that's kind of why we want to do it. We're talking about it, but it's something that we want to do down the road as opposed to immediately. All right, next question. This is a good one. I like this one. What mysteries are there in the setting? Are there things that the GM can set up for players to discover, or do you have most of the hidden lore figured out? And this is actually something Gray and I kind of not wrestled with. I was really big on, I wanted the world to be like a kind of interconnected place, and I wanted at the very least for everywhere the players to come from to be known enough that there wasn't like, um, you're not from the unknown lands to the east. You're all everywhere you go. There's trade, there's back and forth, and that's just because I like that kind of stuff. I like the idea of these sort of various communities coexisting in this weird planet, and so like in terms of that, there isn't as much mystery as like you're not gonna sail off to a new place and be in uncharted land right off the bat. That said, there are lots of hidden mysteries. Thanks to the outer world has essentially blown up 3 times. Like not literally, but it's had some kind of small apocalypse um, on 3 separate occasions, and probably several other smaller cataclysms as in between those. And as a result, there's a lot of places that like there used to be a city here, but now there's just weird magical ruins. Um, there's old machines that people don't know how to build anymore. There's structures whose purpose is shrouded in mystery. There's floating islands. There's sunken islands. And like, so there's still a lot of places, and there's a couple places on the map that are marked off on the map, but they don't have like histories from there. You don't have people coming, you don't have characters. Like when you make a break character, you decide their history, and that's what your character did before they were adventurer. And a bunch of places on the map are sort of mentioned in these histories to kind of this is the kind of people that come from there. You know, if you're a Shining Sea fisherman, you know, you fish in the Dawnward Ocean. That's in one of the different like fishing villages on the Twilight Meridian or on the Soul Alliance and that kind of thing. But like, there's places like there's a place called the Eaten Isle, which is a place that was destroyed during a magical war. Um, you know, in the previous Aeon, and no player character comes from there, and that's because that's supposed to be a weird, terrifying place that people can, you know, you can kind of either fill in the gaps or wait for me to fill in the gaps and use whatever adventure we sort of. But and there's also a kingdom, the kingdom of Crystalia, which is this strange painted land that nobody comes back from, and nobody knows why nobody comes back from it. So that's also supposed to be like a place you can fill in the gap for, or like. And as far as knowing the hidden lore, I know how my games work and how I envision the setting, but the other world, the setting even mentions stuff like various places that are beyond the sky or other dimensions or other worlds. And so in my head, everyone running the game has their own version of the outer world that does canonically exist as sort of another place in this sort of this weird cosmic web of places. So I have figured out as far as I'm going to go and how what we're going to write in the future and stuff like that, but I always want to keep it a little open and give people a lot of legroom to do their own thing. So that's my somewhat unhelpful answer to that question. Um, this is one's just straight to the point. Hey, do you have any actual plays of it? There's one recording of me playing with at a convention many years ago. Obviously, can't release that one because I don't really know the people who were there. It was at a convention. That wouldn't be fair to them, and it's a very bad recording from my phone at the time, so it's not exactly a good one. However, we are working on things as far as actual plays go, so stay tuned. It will be from from people who are a little more better equipped at video editing and that kind of stuff, and probably a little more stage friendly than I am. So uh, anyway, here's another one. Will the Kickstarter have a PDF only option for those of us who live far away and cannot afford shipping? Yes. So the options for Break's Kickstarter, I can tell you that no matter what happens, there are going to be a physical option and a digital option. I'm sorry, back up. There's going to be a digital only option, and there's going to be a physical plus digital option. Just because we feel like if you buy the physical book, you should get the PDF. That's just something we feel like is just standard. So if you just want the PDF, you can get for cheaper, obviously. For significantly cheaper, you can just have the PDF. Or if you want to order the physical book, you can order the physical book and you get a PDF with that. There's going to be other options, but I don't want to spoil anything because we have some fun stuff in store. No tchotchkes, unfortunately. As much as I would love, like say, like a little Battle Princess keychain or something, nothing like that. But there is some cool options, and we'll see that down the line. But yes, don't worry. For you folks who don't want to pay shipping, or you don't have a lot of space, or you have a cool tablet you want to take advantage of, there is a digital only option. But yeah, you always get that PDF. It's a beautiful PDF too. When I was doing proofreading of our initial sort of alpha PDFs, I was just using it on I have a tablet, I have a cheapy tablet I used, and it just looked gorgeous on that. So, and finally, we have one, and I kind of already answered this one, but it's still a fun one to bring up. Do you plan on releasing adventures for the system as well? Yes, we do. So, just to give a kind of idea of like what we're looking at in the future, Break and I, or not Break and I, well, Break and I, yes, Break the game. Break. This is funny. This test print. This cover is already outdated. Our mascot, she's aged up. This is her early on. She's now like in the covers. It's her sort of adult form that already showed up in the book and the pictures. But we were like, Gray was like, I want to do a picture with a bunch of characters, and I'm like, you know what? I love your art, so whatever you want to draw. Anyway, Gray and I really do want to support the game after release. We want to sit this down, and we think it's important that a game continues to get stuff. It doesn't need to be like huge, big things, but like adventures, ideas, that kind of stuff. We're going to stick to a smaller format after we get the main book out. The main book is going to come out, and then from there, we want to do stuff like these sort of smaller zine style supplements, like maybe 30, 40 pages of stuff that you can use in your game, or that'll have an adventure like a scenario, and also include stuff like new character options, and a couple new adversaries, like a new subsystem you might want to use. And we want them to all be themed after something that kind of that sort of telegraphs like what's going to be in this book, and also like hopefully you can sort of figure out what you want as a GM. Like for example, I'm working on one right now that's just for like kind of tips on starting up on a game, and like sort of little tips on running and creating your own scenarios with a built-in scenario in that sort of guides you. The next one I want to do is one based on options and creating your own stuff. And then we want to start doing ones themed around like particular areas of the outer world, or particular like kinds of adventures. We have one down the road. One of the very first ones I wrote while I was just on a Larkwell was where we would go through phases where I'd be writing, and then Gray would be doing layout, and then we'd pass this around. And so one of the times when he was doing layout, I wrote a scenario that we ended up using a lot for playtesting called Trouble and Sprocket, which is like a mystery. And that one I'm excited to release, because are excited to like sort of work on again, like fix up, just because it's kind of outdated at this point. Because that one's a mystery one, and I think running mysteries is really fun in like with like adventures and stuff, but it's hard. It's not like you don't have a lot of like material on that, so I think that'll be good. So yeah, we do want to release stuff. We might even, we're being really optimistic here, but we might be able even to get like a couple of these out a year if we're quick, because we at this point we know each other pretty well. I know not to use too many words and upset poor Gray when he's got to do layout. And then Gray obviously has like the sort of layout and templates worked out for the game already. So we think once we get this book out, we're going to be able to make new supplements and new adventures pretty quickly. But yeah, we do plan on doing that. But anyway, thank you for watching. This was one and hopefully of several videos of this kind. I'm going to try and answer the questions that were on the blog next. Hope to see you there.